Hi everyone, I'm Miss Twisted and welcome to a video on how I created this gem dragon look. This was directly inspired by the Amethyst Dragons from Fizbans Treasury of Dragons, which is a recent D&D book. I love how the gem dragons have like these floating horns and floating rocks as like spines and horns, and I particularly love the colors of the Amethyst Dragon from this book. So let's get into it. So with a rough idea of what I want it to look like, the main thing I'm going to need is a ton of little shiny rocks. For this, I'm going to use some little offcuts of insulation foam, which I've used in a lot of previous projects, so I have a lot of spare little bits and pieces around to scrap that I can use to slowly carve out some little rocks. For this, I'm using my electric wire cutter. It cuts through the insulation foam like butter, so it creates some really smooth lines and just makes my job way easier when I'm going to be cutting out so many of these. Please forgive me temporarily forgetting where the camera is and just slowly floating my hands off screen here. So I'm starting by carving out some really big chunks and trying to get into roughly that sort of diamond shape before just shaving off bits and pieces there. I don't want it to be like perfectly smooth. I want it to have a lot of little facets and uneven edges to make it look like a piece of rubble or something like that. But I've made some bigger ones and some smaller ones, so I'm ready to go. Alright, these are ready to go, so I'm just sticking a toothpick into each one. It's going to make it easy to handle once I start doing some priming. And I'm using all the little bits that I've shaved off the original gems to cut out some tiny little uneven sort of scaly bits as well. To prime these, I've got some watered down Mod Podge. You could use watered down PVA glue as well. I'm going to let these dry thoroughly between each layer, but I'm going to apply 2 to 3 layers of this Mod Podge to make sure they're well sealed. Okay, painting time. So I'm going to spray on a layer of grey primer, then a layer of silver, and finally this beautiful metallic purple that goes over a silver to create that beautiful iridescent sheen. Of course, I'm making sure that the paint dries thoroughly between each layer. So the bigger pieces I'm going to use to create like a floating crown of crystals. So I've got here a headband and some thick armature wire. I'm going to just stab the armature wire into the back of each of the crystals to attach it, and then use some hot glue on the back of that as well to seal it into place. The other end of this wire I can then wrap around the headband a few times and then seal that into place with some hot glue as well. This is what's going to kind of give that floating illusion. I'm going to build up this shape until I've got a full ring of crystals around my head like a crown. With the 5 or so leftover ones that I have, I'm going to bend the armature wire into a particular shape, which I'm going to use to mount the crystals onto. Eventually this is going to be stuck onto my chest and along my shoulder. I'm just going to chuck on some acrylic black paint onto the headband just to basically dull the shininess of the silver headband. So just showing it here on the mannequin, you can kind of get a gist of what I'm going for. Alright, time to start on some makeup. So I'm going to put on some latex elf ears that I have using some spirit gum. I had some purple hairspray I was going to use, but it didn't seem to turn out very well for the colour, so I ended up switching out for my airbrush. The airbrush makeup I'm applying in all the usual contour spots that I would use it. So underneath my jawline, down onto my shoulders and onto my chest, around the sides of my head, and underneath my cheekbones and onto the ears as well. In these leftover sections, I'm going to be applying a white cream makeup. Especially around my neck and shoulders, I'm not going to blend it in entirely because I kind of liked the marks that the sponge left. It kind of reminded me of cracks in a crystal. But it was harder to blend into the edge of where the airbrush makeup is, so I decided to go back in and touch up those areas with the airbrush. After a couple of touch-ups on my cheeks, it's time to apply the crystals. So I do have a couple of the gems that I made that have a flat bottom. I'm going to apply some spirit gum to this area and then apply it also onto my cheek. I'm going to wait for this to get nice and tacky before I glue it on. A lot of the time you would do this before applying anything to your face. But luckily the alcohol makeup doesn't seem to affect this too much, so I'm just going to glue it straight over the makeup. Now I'm going to rinse and repeat just over and over again to apply the rest of the gems. I'm starting with the biggest ones on the outside and bringing the smallest ones into the middle of my face, trying to create a ring over each of the eyes. And I stuck a couple onto my chin as well for good measure. I decided to lean into the cracked crystal idea just to give everything a bit more texture. So I'm using the same cream white makeup that I used before with an eyeliner brush to create these little crack marks just around my whole face and chest. Now before I started working on the eyes and loosen my vision, I wanted to apply some of the crystals to my chest just to make sure I'm on the right track. I decided to just use a tiny strip of masking tape over the back just to provide a bit more surface area to attach some spirit gum to. And then once that's tacky, I'm just pressing it straight into my chest where I want it to sit. In hindsight, I should have had these sitting up a little bit higher, but I just want to know for next time. Alright, with one contact lens in, I'm going to try and apply as much makeup as I can before I put the last one in, just because I do lose a lot of my vision. I've got some black eyeliner on my waterline, and then I'm applying some black eyeshadow and then blending that out into a dark purple eyeshadow just to create some lovely smoky eyes in the center. Fixing up the other eye as well. For the lips, I just applied some very dark purple eyeshadow and sort of tried to bring that out a little bit to the sides to create more of like a dragon's muzzle as opposed to normal lips. And I'm just applying a tiny bit of a highlighter on the top as well to make them a little bit shiny. And with a bit of extra purple lighting from the side, I am happy with this. It is done and dusted. I love how this turned out. I hope you guys did too. Please let me know in the comments if you guys have got any questions, comments, or suggestions. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe and hit that bell, all those other YouTubey things. A special shout out to my top tier patrons, Artemis, Dakota, Residual Images, Tamara, Tim, and Yuri. If you want to help support me and get access to a lot of extra goodies like exclusive content, extra tutorials, previews, behind the scenes stuff, come and join us over on Patreon as well. I'll put the link down in my description below. Thank you guys again for watching. See you in the next one.